Welcome to the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast, where we equipped you to more effectively lead your seat at any employer, business, or industry in which you choose to play. Each week, we help you sharpen your leadership acumen by cracking open the playbooks of dynamic leaders who are doing big things in their professional endeavors. And now your host, leadership tactics and organizational development expert, Karen Farrell Rhodes.
Hello again, my superstars. This is Karen, and welcome to another episode of the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast. On today's episode, we have a tremendous leader in her own right. I was teasing her before we came on that I already know we're going to probably run out of time as we do. You all know I'm a chatterbox, but she has such a dynamic background and perspective that I cannot wait to delve into on leadership and other things as well. I'm so pleased to introduce you to Ms. Tinna Jackson, who is the president and CEO of the Jackson Consulting Group. And the Jackson Consulting Group is a nationally recognized organization, and she is an executive strategist, as well as the best-selling author of the Power Play Journal. She's also an award-winning coach and was named the top executive coach and management consultant of the decade, believe it or not, by the IAOTP. And another fun fact about her is that she was a former deputy chief of staff in the U.S. Senate. And looks like they could definitely use some of her leadership expertise right now, but we're going to stay out of politics because we have a lot of other things to talk about. But welcome to the show, Tinna.
Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
Oh, it is tremendous to have you. And like I said, I cannot wait to delve into a ton of topics, including your book, some of your coaching, and a lot of other things that I have queued up. But before we do so, we always love to learn just a tad bit more about our guests. So for just as much as you feel comfortable, would you mind giving us a sneak peek into your life outside of work?
Absolutely. Well, I am actually born and raised in Washington, D.C. There's only like two of us around.
I think so.
But yeah, it's just me and my husband. We spend a lot of time, during football season, going to every football game, the Washington Commanders, and during basketball season, going to see the Washington Wizards.
Oh.
And we also support other, local teams, the local colleges and universities here too. So we're big sports buffs.
Okay, so we have that in common. My listeners do know I am an Atlanta sports fanatic, long-suffering Atlanta sports fanatic. But the Falcons, Braves, the Five Stripes with the soccer team, and then, of course, local colleges. I'm a UGA grad, so definitely behind my Bulldogs. But then I, support our HBCU teams and everything. So we definitely have that in common.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Fantastic. All right. Well, let's just delve right in, if you don't mind. We could start so many areas, but what I would love for you to do, if you don't mind, is can you start by giving us just a few highlights of your professional career thus far, and then how it brought you to starting the Jackson Consulting Group?
Yeah, absolutely. Interestingly enough, initially I had no interest in going the professional route in terms of working in a professional environment. I've always been a creative person. I literally went to cosmetology school, and my plan, I worked in a law firm during the day, and at night I went to cosmetology school because I was going to do runway work. I was going to do hair and makeup and do New York Fashion Week.
Yeah.
And then at the law firm, I ended up working for multiple partners, which then led to one partner taking an interest in me and recommending that I follow them and go with them to Capitol Hill once a particular member got elected.
Oh.
And I was just resisting. I didn't want to do it. I'm like, I don't respect politicians. But he kept asking, and I met the person, and I said to myself, maybe you're being called to serve. Maybe this is what you're supposed to be doing.
Sure.
And I took it. And 10 years later, I was in the Senate for 10 years. After that, I did some work in a social justice nonprofit. And then I got the political bug again and started working for a political committee. What led me to going into my own business full time with Jackson Consulting Group was I realized, and you know this, having a background in HR, a lot of times people are promoted for different reasons, right?
Right.
Subject matter expertise, not that they're actually good at managing people, not that they can motivate a team, but
Mhm.
they might be good at this one particular thing. We'll give them a shot and hope for the best.
Right.
And I realized there was a gap between good employee performance and effective leadership, and what that effective leadership could look like. And I had several friends that were leaving and, taking big C-level jobs, and, whether they were qualified for those jobs is another story.
There
But
you go.
there were gaps.
Mhm.
And I figured with Jackson Consulting Group, I could help fill those gaps as
Mhm.
much as I could, particularly in this town in DC.
Absolutely. I'm sure there's plenty of opportunity everywhere, but
Hmm.
being in or knowing about the political environment, I'm sure there's a lot that you brought to the table that could help them
Hmm.
in closing those gaps, and that's awesome. And how has it been so far, moving from, I guess, a structured position into
Hmm.
consulting?
Hmm. I think it was an interesting transition at first,
Hmm.
because my work ethic didn't shift.
Hmm.
In that, even my husband was like, "Do you have to check with your boss before you take a vacation?"
Right.
Like, "Oh, I am the boss.
That's
Let
right.
me chill out. Let me restructure this. Let me actually take a look at my workload that I have created, because I've brought these clients on. And
Right.
so I've had to think about, what running a business actually looks like.
Right.
Not being the chief, someone that I met over the weekend talked about chief everything officer. You can't do that when you are trying to do business development, bring in clients, and also service those clients. You can't do all of those other things.
No, you can't.
It's just impossible.
Right. Right. And I will say that too. When my listeners know, my last main corporate gig before I started my consulting firm was, I worked almost 14 years for Microsoft in a variety of roles, and under the HR and organizational change and development umbrella, but multiple roles. And it is a transition that
Hmm.
and as much planning as you do until you're walking in those shoes,
Right.
you're not quite sure how to regulate yourself, but you
Hmm.
do learn it very quickly.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I always say, here we are 10 years later, and the lights are still on, and we're just doing great. So it has
Hmm.
been extremely rewarding to be able to do that. So, but I just want
Absolutely.
to wish you congratulations for making that courageous leap as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, let's get now switch gears and talk about your best-selling the Power Play Journal. Would love for you to share with the listeners a bit more about uh, what's it all about,
Mhm.
and maybe a couple of points that you or teasers that you would like to share with us of lessons that you're getting across to your readers.
Absolutely. Thank you. Going back to, the experience of recognizing that some people are promoted for different reasons. What I wanted to do with this book was to get people to reflect on why they're functioning the way they're functioning, right? The book is based on, emotional intelligence concepts, right? Self-regulation, self-awareness is key. And what I wanted to do with this book is introduce 32 strategies, battle-tested strategies for leadership and impact, and just remind people that we need to be checking ourselves when it
Mhm.
comes to strategic planning, building a legacy, authentic leadership, resilient leadership. Just like the first chapter is on resilient leadership, and I tell a personal story where I lost two brothers back to back during COVID.
Sorry to
But
hear
I
that.
but I also had a very important job that I had to tell myself or ask myself, when are you going to go back to work? And
Mm.
all I could hear were my brothers, who were very tough guys, telling me, like, don't sit around crying over me. Go back
Right.
to work. Like, go back to work. And but in doing that, I made sure that I made space for myself. If
Mm.
I was feeling bad or, thinking about my brothers, I would give myself that space. And I made sure that the people I was working with understood that that space was needed.
Yes.
And people were very respectful. They were actually surprised that I had returned to work so quickly. But
Mhm.
I did give myself that space, and I honored that every step of the way.
There's a lesson for all there, especially the people leaders out there. Um, it was fantastic that you carved out that space for yourself, but there's some work environments that may not have been as flexible for
Mhm.
that. And for the people leaders and executives out there, when your employees are going through something major, please do all that you can to give them some air cover to be able
Mhm.
to tackle that, because um, they will not only appreciate it, but their trust and loyalty
Mhm.
and for you and the company will quadruple. And I'll share very quickly my own story. It wasn't during COVID. I mean, I did lose a few family members during COVID, but when I was at Microsoft, I became the primary caregiver for both my mother and grandmother.
Mhm.
Simultaneously, they had their own medical situations they were working through. And I still remember, and I'm still grateful to this day, my boss giving me the time that I needed when I needed, time off. I mean, we had some help come in, but time off, as long as I was able to get, the core functions of my position done.
Mhm.
She was so flexible, and I'm still, here it is, 10 years later, I am still so thankful
Mhm.
for that space and grace that was given to me. And it wasn't just the boss, it was also the culture of the company to do so as
Mhm.
well. But I will never have anything bad to say
Yeah.
about my experience. And so I just wanted to share that story with you as well.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's where empathy comes in, right? Put yourself, as a leader, put yourself in the employee's shoes when they're experiencing a loss.
That's
It
right.
is not different when it's happening to you.
Yes, exactly.
And I think people forget that when they become, leaders at the top of this food chain. I really do. I think they forget.
Yeah, I think so too. And I don't know where or how that happens, but they do. And
Mhm.
I've seen it many times and had to be tactful in reminding them of,
Mhm.
some other
Mhm.
things they should keep in consideration during those
Yeah.
types of times.
Yeah.
You have a powerful phrase that you amplify in all of your work, and it's called the power of the pause. It's kind of similar to what your experience that you mentioned, but it's a deeper meaning behind that. And I would love to give you an opportunity to share with the listeners about that.
Yeah, I think, particularly as women, I think we do a lot, and we are capable of taking on a lot. We even solve problems that no one has asked us to solve. We are It's easy for us to see the forest through the trees. We know exactly how to fix a problem, whether it's in the workplace or at home.
That's right.
And after a while, you get tired and you realize, unbeknownst to you, that it's starting to look like burnout. It's starting to look like headaches. It's starting to look like you can't, like you're falling asleep earlier than normal. It looks like you don't feel like cooking, or you don't even feel like eating. And I say the power of the pause because it's, first of all, it's okay to stop. It is okay to recognize that I might be doing a little too much.
Yeah.
And it's okay to pause and be selfish. Like, look at yourself, look at what you're doing, look at all that you're pouring out and you're not receiving in return.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it is okay to stop, to pause, and evaluate what you've been doing and what you might consider doing differently. And really looking at what support might look like for you and asking for that support.
Oh, I love that. Absolutely. But we're not really taught to do that once you leave college.
Right.
Once you get into the business world, I can't think of anyone or any conversation where we were talking about pausing, asking questions, taking things off one's plate if things are putting on. We're so good about accepting other duties as assigned, but not asking, if we do that, what can be deprioritized for the moment, so that we can keep some kind of work-life well-being. We're never taught to do that. And I love your empowerment message to take it upon yourself and pause and see and regroup.
And I think as leaders too, I think we need to recognize the signs.
Yes.
When someone might be overloaded, overextended, or flailing. I'll tell you a quick story. I was with one organization and, I would do rounds. You're walking around talking with folks, just doing quick check-ins.
Sure.
And I remember a young lady who, first day she walked in, her hair was long, just beautiful and healthy. And I know this because, remember, I went to cosmetology school.
Sure, yeah.
And so, but then a couple months later, I noticed her hair was shorter, like brittle, like breaking off, and I went to her supervisor and I said, "Hey, have you noticed anything about, she looks different, looks a little weary, she's lost some hair." It's like, "No, I don't know what you're talking about." I was like, "You need to check on her and find out what is going on." Absolutely. But I just dismissed it and I went directly to the young lady and I said, "Hey, you look different. Is everything okay? Like, your hair is different." She's like, "Oh my God, I'm just so, this job is too much." I said, "Okay, it's okay to say something." It is okay to say something. I said, "I would recommend that during the next check-in with your boss that you just talk about your workload. Ask if things can be reprioritized or something."
Right.
But it's important to take that step. It's okay to speak up and say, that you need help.
That's right. That's
But
absolutely right.
But I couldn't believe that, like, when I went to the supervisor, like, they just never noticed. You see this person every single day. They are a senior member of your team, and you didn't notice that someone's hair goes from literally the middle of their back to, like, close to the ear. And I'm like, that's not a haircut.
No.
And even if it was a haircut, you probably would have noticed and either complimented or just at least noticed.
Right.
Yeah.
You should always be on the notice, be on the alert, especially for your people. They're only as, I guess, strong and impactful as confident as they feel, if that makes sense. And you brought up a good point, and I'd love to do. One of the things we love to do on the podcast is to give our listeners just a couple of tips or two, just to keep in their hip pocket that they can use on day one. And you started with this previous story about the young lady that you observed. Are there maybe one or two more tips that you can give leaders on how to stay closer to their teams or be more aware about the needs of their teams?
I think it's important for leaders to recognize what's not being said. Nonverbal cues, I think, are very important. People shake their heads yes, and they mean no.
All the time.
Just in facial expressions, just in the blink of an eye.
That's right.
And I think it's important to notice those things. The other tip I have is just knowing who you are as a leader, being more self-aware,
Mm-hmm.
because I think as leaders, we need more feedback from the people we work with and from our peers.
Mm-hmm.
It is startling to find out you are not the person that you're trying to project, and people see you differently.
It is. It
I
is.
can't tell you how many people are walking around thinking they're great leaders and they are terrible.
I know. Oh my goodness. And you see it a lot, especially in the consulting world, because for some reason they let their guard down a little. I've noticed leaders let their executives let their guard down a little bit more when you're a consultant versus
Mhm.
when you're, maybe an HR leader or
Mhm.
fellow colleague, because you want to have that, perception of I've got this all solved. I can
Mhm.
do it. But I've noticed when I consult with them, especially one on one, you really truly find out how not self aware a lot of people are. And to your point, when they come to that realization, whether it be via feedback on 360s or behaviors that you as a coach point out, they are quite startled. And um, some take it well and some take it not so well, to be honest with you,
Mhm. Mhm.
when that enlightenment comes to them.
Yeah,
So,
it's
yeah,
alarming.
it is.
It's
It
like how
definitely.
it's scary that someone goes through life. Let's say you're in your 40s and you make it to a VP or C-level
Mhm.
position, and no one's ever told you
Yeah,
that you don't receive feedback well,
right.
or you think you're patient but you say you're patient but you don't behave as a patient leader. And
Yes.
what does that look like? What do you think a patient leader looks like? Because what you're exhibiting is not patient.
Right. Exactly. You're so right. You're so right. Um, Also, one of the things that a lot of leaders, including myself, have always considered themselves when we talk about kind of self reflection is
Mhm.
considered themselves as a high achiever. I know
Mhm.
throughout my corporate career, I've been on almost everybody's quote unquote high potential list or high performer list. I've been on succession slates and all that. But I've always wanted to, I had that just inner value to show up as my best and
Mhm.
try to do what I can to help support the company and others and the teammates. And I'm just curious if you had thoughts on how high performing leaders can learn to separate their ambition from also personal alignment.
Yeah, it's tough. I think it depends on where your focus truly is.
Mhm.
um I think when we are within an organizational structure, we are working hard for the organization, either because we believe in the culture, we believe in the organization and the mission, and we
Mhm.
want to make sure we are achieving that mission and that we are looking good in the process,
Right.
right? And
Mhm.
that might mean, making sure that you are responsive after 5 p.m., or that you are overdoing it on a project, you're constantly over delivering.
Mhm.
However, when it comes to personal alignment, that's a bigger piece. That's a level of energy, that's a level of knowledge, that's a level of purpose that you have to become familiar with. You have to know that whether or not the organization you're working with is in alignment with the purpose that you have for your life and your career.
There you
And
go.
if that organization, the work that you're doing, is in alignment with that purpose,
Yeah.
that could help drive your performance on a higher level.
Right.
I think a lot of people get burned out because they know that they're supposed to be doing something different, and they're trying to keep up with the person that they've become within that organization.
Yeah.
Reliable, someone
Mhm.
that's always responsive, someone that is over delivering, someone that's always willing to accept more work, while others are not accepting more work. They're able to leave at 5 p.m., but for some reason you keep taking on more work. And it's like, why. At some point, you have to ask yourself why.
Right.
And a lot of times these people are fully aware that they have other desires. There's something else that they want to do. In a perfect world, if they had nothing to worry about, what else would you do outside of this work? They would probably choose something else.
You're absolutely right. Probably so. And it involves courage for them to kind of, and reflection, to realize that and to make a change. And I'm curious if you have any advice to individuals who are going through that right now, who are fearful if they pivot or course correct that things might fall apart, or if they move on. There's this saying, leaving dead bodies in the wake. They're fearful for their previous teams will fall apart and not do well, and then they'll get blamed, for not setting them up for success. Any thoughts or advice for those that might face those types of situations?
I have so many thoughts.
Share a few, please.
I think we forget that even though some organizations say we're a family, actually you're not, because if you have to remember that the work that you are doing is in exchange for pay, right?
Yes.
You perform a job in exchange for your paycheck and benefits. And I think it's important to remember that if something happens to you and you are no longer with that organization, that job posting will go up within 10 days.
There you go.
If not immediately.
There you go.
Right. And so I think that if anyone is interested or thinking about making a pivot, there has to be a plan. I'm not going to tell anyone, oh, quit your job and start your business.
Right.
In my heart, I want to tell everyone to recognize their talents and monetize on those talents in their own business. But the truth of the matter is, you should have a plan. You should also determine what support you truly have.
That's
because initially you may think you have certain people's support, but when you are no longer, the C-level person in an organization, you realize that identity that you've attached yourself to, once it's gone, other people leave too.
That's right.
Right. And so I think it's important for anyone, if they're looking to make a pivot, you have to have a plan. Whether that is, putting money away, or at least reframing your role in your organization so that you can get through.
That's right. There you go.
I think reframing a lot of times can be helpful, although it's difficult. But I think, with a little advice and coaching, you could reframe, your role and redefine the fit in an organization, especially if you're one of those special people who are multi-hyphenates and very talented.
Right.
It's very possible that you could, redefine how you show up in the role.
That's right.
As someone who was a high performer and overperformer, I was offering work and offering my talents that no one asked me to.
Yes, same here. All the time.
When I took a step back, I was like, no one asked me to do this. What am I doing? I wasn't making more money as a result.
No. I got a pat on the back. I got an award, but it was forgotten about 20 minutes after we walked out of the celebration meeting, right?
Exactly. Cake for everybody.
That's right.
And then you walk out and it's like, okay, great, good for you.
Yeah.
And so those kinds of things, like, I'm not telling anyone not to, not to be a high performer.
Right.
But in that process, sometimes you have to stop yourself and allow others to contribute.
That's right. You absolutely do. And what I'll also say before we start our wrap up is that for those who can't afford it or their employer supports it, it's worth investing in yourself for a coach, similar to what Tinna is doing with her business, but she offers. But sometimes it's hard to work it out on your own, and having that thought partner with a really good coach, it can be very helpful and can accelerate your decision making, and help you understand better your next steps. And unfortunately, I knew we were going to have run out of time, because I have about 6 more questions I wanted to ask at a minimum. And unfortunately, we're close to time. But we can't let you sneak out of here without asking you our signature question that we ask all of our guests. And for my new listeners out there, this is based on some research on leadership execution that my firm had done. And we wrote a book about it called Lead at the Top of Your Game. That is the basis for this podcast as well. But we always love to ask our guests, which of the 7 big buckets of tactics that we wrote about in the book really resonated with them. And Tinna was so kind to share that executive presence really resonated with her. And the way we define executive presence is that it's your ability as a leader to make really clear and convincing either oral or written statements in order to influence and lead others. It's basically having that presence, that grit, that data, and that confidence to share information in a way that compels others to really follow your lead. So curious minds want to know, Ms. Tinna, why does executive presence really resonate with you?
Well, it definitely resonates with me because I've worked with so many people that didn't have it. It's executive presence is so important because you cannot achieve your mission without the staff that you hire or that you are charged with leading, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a confused staff equals a confused leader.
Yes.
As a former staffer, I can tell you, I hated when my boss didn't know what he or she was doing.
I can imagine.
Because we all had to figure it out.
Yes.
And then we'd be penalized if we did something wrong. But we didn't have the clarity, the
direction,
mission,
right?
the why. The why is so important.
Oh my gosh.
The why on its own will make people move.
Yes. Preach. Yes.
You get goosebumps from the why.
Yes.
You know? And it's like, okay, we're going, whatever you tell us to do, we are with you, sir.
Yes. Lead the charge. Right there.
Give me the task list, coach. We are with you.
Right.
But so many people lack that. And this is beyond executive presence and how you look and how you present yourself. It is truly being able to communicate an effective message so that others can be motivated and act.
That's right.
And if absence of that, you're going to continue to have misdirection and employees who will be confused.
That's right.
And burnt out because they're trying to figure things out on their own.
That is absolutely right. And we no one has time for that. The employees nor the company and the leaders.
Right.
Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap it up here, Ms. Tinna. But before we do, I always love to give a little bit of airtime to guests to let our listeners know where to find you. We'll have information, obviously, in our show notes. But if you can share, if individuals would love to connect with you and learn more about your company, where can they do so?
Absolutely. So we are on LinkedIn, Tinna Jackson, Tinna with 2 N's, people.
There you go.
Jackson. Also on Instagram, I am Tinna Jackson. And also Jackson Consulting Group is at tinnajackson.com.
There you go. All right, listeners, as I said, we'll have the information in the show notes for you in case you weren't able to jot that down. But definitely, she's worth connecting with. I think the world of her and her work and what she's doing. And I'm sure you'll learn more about her as you go to her socials and her website. So, Ms. Tinna, thank you so much for the gift of your time today. You were an absolutely fantastic guest.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you too, listeners, for the gift of your time as well. Because as we always say, we know there are literally millions of other podcasts you can be listening to, and we do not take your patronage lightly at all. All that we ask is that you like and subscribe on your favorite platform of choice and share our podcast with just one friend, because by doing so, it'll help us all better lead at the top of our game. Thank you so much, and I will see you next week. Take care. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening to the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast, where we help you lead your seat at any employer, business, or industry in which you choose to play. You can check out the show notes, additional episodes, bonus resources, and also submit guest recommendations on our website at leadyourgamepodcast.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn by searching for the name Karen Rhodes, with Karen being spelled Karan. And if you like the show, the greatest gift you can give would be to subscribe and leave a rating on your podcast platform of choice. This podcast has been a production of Shockingly Different Leadership, a global consultancy which helps organizations execute their people, talent development, and organizational effectiveness initiatives on an on-demand project or contract basis. Huge thanks to our production and editing team for a job well done. Goodbye for now.